Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turf's Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone Show this evening.
Hey, and a pleasant good afternoon, evening, and morning, depending where you are in the wonderful world. I'm Rob Starr, along with my special co-host and producer, Mr. We all know his name, Mr. Chris Davey. Hi, Chris. We know.
What do you say, Robert?
I just like to fun with you. How are you today?
You do. We're having fun here. It is the afternoon here in sunny Southern California. I think finally today the summer face, the face of summer rather, is shown. So nice warm day. Got into the low to mid 80s and kind of pleasant, real nice.
It was 64 here when I got up in the morning in sunny, dismal California.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, a great show today, right? And Miss Chris Austin will not be with us, as you know, Rob. So she's off this week, and we wish her the very, very best on her travels. And she'll be back with us next week. So today, Rob, I know we're going to talk about something that several of our listeners have written about. They've asked us about, kind of go through the differences between natural turf, synthetic turf, and the differences between pros and cons kind of thing. We're going to stay Swiss in this, aren't we, Rob? I mean, Geneva, right? We're not going to say one way or another. We're just going to say, this is sort of like the facts. You make the decision.
I totally agree. And I thought what we do is we can both go down a list and pick out 10. We'll keep it simple. What we think are the 10 benefits of artificial turf, and we'll also think about what's the 10 best points about natural turf. And everybody has their own decision. Everybody uses what they want. And like you said, we're not here to tell them what they have to do or how to do it or anything else. Just give an opinion so they can hear both sides. So let's start off with the benefits of artificial turf. What do you say?
I mean, here's my deal, right? I mean, you drive around the neighborhood, you see these beautiful, healthy lawns, green grass, and all that stuff, and that's great. But they don't maintain themselves, right, Rob? They take some effort and some money, whether you're doing it yourself or you've got a contractor doing it or whatever. And I think over the last 10, 15 years or so, we've seen people adapt to artificial turf as an alternative to green turf or to native turf. And, lots of reasons for that. And so we'll go through a couple of them. The first one that's just obvious for us is the maintenance, right? And they say low maintenance, and it may be lower, but I don't know if it's maintenance free. I think that's a myth. A lot of people think artificial turf is maintenance free, but it certainly is not.
No, especially if you have pets, a lot of people are buying the artificial turf because they figure when their dogs use their lawn as a how should I say, dumping area.
You can say that.
Then they get spots on their grass and things of that sort. So they got to take care of it. Plus, you got to buy. People have dogs and artificial turf. They buy the spray to spray it down that breaks down all that stuff that's on that and try to neutralize the smell and do that. So there's some cost to maintenance on that. But I guess it's easier than either hiring a gardener every single week or buying a lawnmower and doing it yourself. And so the maintenance, in the relatively exploring space, it's low maintenance. I think the second thing is no watering, and that which people see as lowering the water bill. And if you have a large yard and you don't use the turf, it's not for active play or anything like that, why spend the money to water? I mean, I think that's a sensible reason to do it. And I think a lot of people who live in senior communities, retirement communities, they certainly, maybe they came from places that had a gardener and they paid the fee every month to them to take care of it. But just think, they don't have to water it all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that saves money.
It does, and there's other issues too, like the weather, right? I mean, artificial turf is superior in terms of weather resistance, right? I mean, it's not gonna be damaged by frost or heavy rains or super heat waves that come and that can damage or ruin it. You're not going to get brown spots. You're not going to get critters and stuff digging it up because it's much more durable than real grass. But you still have to clean it. It's still got to be not watered to grow, but you still have to wash it down, right? You still need to clean it. Here's another issue. You talk about parts of the country where it's very humid and very wet. You've got mold and mildew issues that can happen in the grass, and of course those are much less if you have artificial turf. So, looks is not everything, right? There's a lot more to it. You do get strong, consistent color though with artificial grass, right? Stays the same. Looks good. What else you got, Rob?
Well, you said a whole bunch there. I mean, you talked about durability. You talked about being pet friendly and weather resistant. I think that's good. One of the things they talk about that we hear a lot about is mold and mildew resistant. And I've heard a lot of stories about that, plus and minus. They say it's good. It helps reduce all of that. But I also saw a thing in the Journal of Medicine a couple of years ago how soccer fields back on the East Coast, they were doing a study and found that children who play on those types of fields were reactant to the mold and mildew and could produce some cancer effects. So, I guess the decision is still out there of really, is it true or is it not true? Does that cause any problem with that? Now, I know they talk about being chemical free, but again, it's just what the manufacturers state. I couldn't tell you if that's a truism or not. So.
Well, I'm going to agree that I think that the quality of artificial turf has improved over the last 10 to a dozen years. I'm not going to say it hasn't because I know it has. And I've seen plenty of people in my neighborhood right here with artificial turf, but they still get weeds. It grows around the edges. It grows in the seams. It grows around planter bases and around trees and other ornamental stuff you may have in the middle of a artificial turf lawn. So I'm just going to say, it's not trouble free, right? So maybe we should give turf grass a couple of minutes of equal time here, Rob. So
we will. The last thing I'll say about this is people look at it as a value over time. So you don't have to keep reseeding the lawn and doing that every single year and all that. So I agree with you. Let's talk about a good point on the benefits of turf grass. Go ahead, I'll let you start.
Well, the big thing for me is obviously has to do with oxygen and carbon dioxide sequestration, right? Carbon sequestration, which you get with air and every other plant. Grass actually has a huge potential, better than some plants, trees, even on a square foot coverage basis, right? Because of the amount of carbon it can store and absorb. So that's my biggest plus for turf grass.
I would add to that erosion control. I think is really important. Green is more effective, and green grass is more effective, and it's the best way to bind, like you said, the oxygen to the planet. It prevents a lot of damage. Where people don't have that, even if they have artificial turf, they can get erosion underneath that. I've seen that happen in a couple of places.
It does. Yeah, it does.
What else do you see?
So from an energy standpoint, there's a plus. There's a big plus for turf grasses as well, natural turf grasses, right? Because they cool the air by absorbing the solar radiation, right? We talked about carbon sequestration, but grass all by itself just has just performs a great feat because it actually absorbs solar radiation, and you get a cooling effect from that, and that can result in an energy reduction in energy for the surrounding area, especially your home, right? Because it essentially is a temperature modification, right? The hottest parts of the buildings on the street, they heat up overnight. You've got all that urban housing effect and all that stuff, but a grass lawn adjacent to any of those buildings is a huge asset and in energy conservation. Yeah.
Also, you have the temperature factor, and I know because I have had both artificial turf and I've had full grass turf, and the temperature difference can be up to 30 degrees.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Everybody thinks, hey, it's great to let your pets go out on it, but it's hot. I mean, I've walked out of a pool and got onto artificial turf and almost burnt my feet. It was so hot. Where the grass gives you that nice.
Yeah, it can get to 150 degrees, 145 degrees surface temperature. That'll burn dogs' paws. Kids can't play on it. So on artificial turf.
No, it's a harder way to go, because I know a lot of sports fields, a lot of the athletes complain that it's more damaging to their bodies and such with that. One thing that I think is also good to that is the beauty and curb appeal. But for me, I like the smell of fresh cut grass.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean that's and when you have beauty and curb appeal, I mean that's really important. You get that nice lush, and it also cools the temperature around. And everybody says, "Oh, put rock in and everything else," but rock generates heat, and it's like taking trees out. I mean, you want the trees that are close to the house. It gives some shade. It reduces the temperature to the dwelling. I think that's an important thing. What else do you see?
I do too. There's also so I'm just make a quick comment here about you were talking about the curb appeal and all that. So depending on where you live in the United States, particularly, I'm talking right now, right, is going to be a factor on whether you have artificial turf or natural turf. But homes generally with a natural turf, real grass garden generally have higher home values. And, we've seen that over and over again. It becomes a place where the family can meet. There's recreation effects for it. It gives you a place to go out and promotes physical, mental health, all that kind of stuff. There's study after study after study about the benefits of natural green turf. So, you got to throw that in the mix.
And to me, noise and glare reduction is a thing. And so, going through this, I know our listeners always like to know what's the best way to go. Well, we can't tell you which is the best way to go. It's the best way for your situation and what you want to live with, and all the different things we talked about. It's a matter of personal opinion. There's pros to each. There's negatives to each. Again, it's a decision that the homeowner has to understand what's going to be best for them and what they look at. Do they look at it for only comfort? Do they look at it for reducing water? They have a reason for going in a certain direction, and that's their thing. So I hope that answers. I hope that answers a bunch of questions for everybody. So we'll take it like that. Well put. So anyway, go ahead, Chris.
We did have a number of listeners that were inquired about that, so we've done our part, Rob, and given an even Steven review of synthetic versus natural turf. So we'll bring up another subject like this in future episodes.
Excellent. Well, we got a special guest coming on in just a minute or so, but I thought we'd take a little commercial break before we go into it, because I really don't want to interrupt the next featured guest on the show. It's a really important documentary we're going to be doing. So let's take a little quick break for a short commercial. Come back and we'll give us our surprise guest. So stick around. We'll be right back.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda, celebrating our 25th anniversary. Sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932. Protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
Get ready, because the forecast for this May through June is a torrential downpour of points. Site One is proud to introduce our exclusive NDS Point Storm 24 event. Partners Program members who use drainage, hardscapes, and irrigation products can earn up to 4x the rewards in May and June for purchasing quality NDS products. That's 4x the points on a whole range of product solutions for residential and commercial projects. NDS is a leader in water management solutions and is known for superior quality and performance, as well as ease of installation and extreme durability. You can count on Site One and NDS to help you grow your business. NDS Point Storm 24 from May through June. It's the perfect storm of points and performance.
All right, welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone Show. Hope everybody's having a great day, and I know it's nice here. I don't know what it is on the East Coast. I know they were having thunderstorms and all kinds of things the last couple of days, so I hope that improved. But anyway, we have a featured guest with us. His name is Mike Hightower. And Mike is currently director of the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium. And that's a joint venture effort of the New Mexico Environmental Department and New Mexico State University. A little background about Mike. He's retired from Sandia National Laboratories, where he worked in aerospace, weapons, energy, and natural resources research and engineering. Mike holds a bachelor's and master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from New Mexico State University, and for the past 3 decades, he has focused on approaches to enhance critical infrastructure and natural resource stewardship and security. So we'd like to welcome Mr. Mike Hightower. Mike, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Doing fine, Robert. How are you today?
Good. You're on the East Coast, so let our listeners know. And is the weather good over there, wherever you are?
I'm outside Washington, D.C., and the weather's just fine right now.
Good. Well, just for our audience, a little brief statement here by me. We're going to do a 6-part segment, minimum of 6-part segment, on the topic of what Mike and his consortium are doing. I think it's a very important subject, and it's something that we believe is an important factor about water and what you can do with water, especially what's happening. And Mike's going to give us kind of a 50,000-foot description of how it started, what it was, what it is, and what the main objective is going to be. So I'm going to let Chris start off with some question for you. Chris?
Hey, Mike, good to talk to you again. I hope you're doing well today, sir. So, maybe the best way to start, Mike, is just to give our listeners kind of the 30,000-foot view, as Rob said, of what the consortium is, this consortium you're managing, and, kind of shed a little light to start off the conversation for a little background for our listeners.
Surely, that'll be fine. Probably the first thing they ought to mention before I get into kind of the role of the consortium is the fact that over the last 2 decades, there's been a huge movement within both globally and in the United States toward the use of non-traditional waters, moving away from just looking at fresh surface water and groundwater to looking at these non-traditional waters like seawater desalination, brackish water desalination, and wastewater treatment and reuse. It has become kind of the mode of operation, if you will, with United Nations, with their suggestions within their millennial goals that the reuse of wastewater was going to be one of the major new elements for water supplies worldwide. And it includes activities by the U.S. EPA around the treatment and reuse of produced water and other types of non-traditional waters for reuse by industry and communities. The emphasis in the United States by the EPA it came out in 2020 in their Water Reuse Action Plan. So if listeners want to look at that document and read the directions in the U.S. on water availability and new water supplies, is look at the U.S. EPA's 2020 Water Reuse Action Plan, which suggests the movement in the U.S. toward the use and reuse of these industrial wastewaters. One of those waters that they have selected is produced water. Part of that is because, which is water that is co-generated out of the oil and gas industry. For every barrel of oil, you get anywhere from 3 to 10 barrels of produced water from the oil and gas industry. That water is generally currently disposed of in deep well injection, and that water is not made available for other uses within the natural water cycle. So produced water is one of those industrial wastewaters that is a priority for the U.S. EPA. And our consortium in New Mexico, because of our activities associated with oil and gas in New Mexico, was to try and look at the safe treatment of this produced water that comes up with oil and gas and get it to qualities that would allow it to be reused for specific fit-for-purpose applications like agricultural uses that you would see in the West, municipal supplies, industrial applications like cooling towers or data centers, or in some of the Western states, rangeland restoration, environmental restoration for degraded landscapes and watersheds. So a number of different types of applications of these treated waters. They don't all have to be treated to drinking water quality, but they have to be treated to a quality that's safe for the application that they need. And so our consortium, the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium, is focused on the aspects of what are the cost and the performance of treatment technologies, and then what's the risk and toxicology analysis of the treated water, and can we make this water safe? So those are our major research goals. That's kind of how produced water from oil and gas fits into both the national perspective and the perspectives around for states around the country. Not only in New Mexico, but some 35 states in the United States have oil and gas operations. So treating produced water and using it and reusing it rather than just disposing it deep down hole is something that a number of states across the country, both in the West and the East, are looking at. So hopefully that gives you a background of what our consortium's doing, how it fits into kind of the national perspective, and how we're working with the U.S. EPA and other state environmental agencies to treat this water and look at its safe reuse. Okay?
Now,
hopefully that gives you a good overview.
Yeah. Now, the treatment versus the cost of these things, it depends on which model you're talking about, as you said, from brackish water to desal water to all different types of things. Where's the best buck for the projects to go? And I guess the easiest one to attack, or maybe the hardest one to attack, but it could bring the best results.
Okay, well, a lot of the produced water around the country has different qualities. In eastern United States, the water could be or have high levels of total dissolved solids, salts, or organics. In some parts of the western U.S., some of the produced waters are relatively fresh. They don't have as high of salinity. They don't have as much organic, especially those that are involved in the production of natural gas. So it really varies both around the country and by the type of water and the quality of the water. And then it varies by the quality of the water needed for the different applications. An example, Robert, would be drinking water requires a salt concentration of less than 500, whereas for rangeland applications and for agricultural applications, you might be able to get by with something that's 2 or 3 times higher in the salt content. So it depends upon where you are and what kind of opportunities you have and what kind of water quality you start off with your produced water. But what we're looking at is the cost and performance of technologies and how they vary and how you might want to modify the treatment train, whether the types of pre-treatment, treatment, and post-treatment you need to get the water for that specific application you need. What we're finding is that for some waters, it's relatively inexpensive compared to bringing in new fresh water supplies from 40 or 50 miles away, which we're seeing in some states. Texas, for example, and California are transporting fresh water from a location and moving it 50 or 100 miles away. What we're finding is treating those locally available waters that maybe are non-traditional are actually cheaper to treat and to reuse than it is to try to use the energy to pump those waters 50 or 100 miles away uphill, for example. So I really didn't answer your question specifically, but we do have a range of technologies that have been developed over the last 20 years, and putting those together in the right treatment train for the local application, I think is showing that we can do this safely and that we can do it cost effectively relative to other options for a lot of communities across the country.
Hey, Mike. Okay. So just a little
Chris.
bit, it was great. It was a good description, Mike. For some of our listeners, though, in past segments on the Water Zone here, we've talked to several people who have participated in World Water Day that was just a couple of months ago. And, a lot of discussion around the United Nations SDGs or UN's Sustainable Development Goals there, and of which you mentioned, and I don't have the list, but I think it's number 6, if I'm right, Mike, on their list, looking at alternate sources of water. But you mentioned produced water as being one of the sources of water that the EPA's National Water Reuse Action Plan was looking at, and I'm assuming there are others. Can you talk to the others a little bit, just some background for our listeners? I'm sure it's got stormwaters in there and some industrial kinds of waters and stuff like that. But can you kind of give us a brief overview of what, other than produced water, what those other sources of water might be?
Sure. And EPA identified 5 major categories of wastewater that they were interested in looking at, and it had to do a lot with how ubiquitous those types of waters are around the country. And so, as I mentioned, produced water is on that top 5 because there's oil and gas production in 35 states, and there are some large local volumes of produced water in the West and in the East that would be available for uses. The other 4 include things like stormwater, which, of course, is water that we find everywhere. It's ubiquitous across the U.S., so being able to handle and treat stormwater for reuse rather than just letting it go down and out the sewer and down the river is another one that is a high priority. Another industrial water that is a high priority because they use a lot of water is power plants. Power plants use a significant amount of water for cooling. When they do that, they create a lot of concentrated brines. They call it blowdown. And oftentimes that blowdown is put into an evaporation pond or other types of disposal. And so there's large volumes of water that come out of electric power generation. Another one that is very important that they work on is municipal wastewater reuse. Right now we do wastewater reuse for purple pipe, for agricultural applications like golf courses and turf grasses, medians. They're looking at trying to recycle all of that municipal wastewater for treating it to qualities that you could use for industrial applications and things of that nature. So the last one is, if anyone's familiar with agriculture, oftentimes you get agricultural return flows that are high in nutrients and high in solids and turbidity that possibly need to be treated so that you could reuse that water, and rather than dilute it with fresh water, you treat that water and then can reuse it within your agricultural process. So those are the 5 major types of waters that EPA has mentioned in their Water Reuse Action Plan, and we're helping out, our consortium is helping out EPA in developing strategies specifically for produced water. But they have similar groups, including the Water Reuse Association, which is focused on municipal wastewater, is working with them to help them on improving municipal wastewater reuse, and other agencies and groups for the other sectors also. Hopefully that answers that question.
It does indeed. So just managing the message board here. Got a couple of listeners questioning why only 35 states, Mike. I mean, is it just where the water is available in these 35 states? Is there some geographical connection between those states? Why just 35? Why not all the states?
Well, for the EPA RAP program, they're involved with all the states. All 50 states are involved at some level within those 5 major categories. The produced water is the only reason we're talking about 35 states, because there's only about 35 states that produce oil and gas in the country.
Gotcha.
A lot of people did not know that there were that many states that have oil and gas operations, but there are 35 states. So those are the 35 states that we're working with. We're working with Pennsylvania, all the way from Pennsylvania and Ohio through Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, California, Wyoming. So there's a range of both eastern states and western states that generate produced water, and that's why our consortium is only working with those 35 states. The rest of the EPA program, though, is focused on all 50 states, because all 50 states have power plants, they have municipal supplies, they have agricultural return flows. But we're just working on those 35. Hopefully that answers that question for that viewer or listener.
Yeah, it does.
Hey, Mike, I know I've read some articles and had some people in from Israel and some other countries, and they were talking about, for example, and I'll use Israel for an example, that they had a lot of vegetation, agriculture-wise, that was grown in with high salinity type water, and they were working with biologists to see if they can alter the crop to accept, I'll call it a non-standard level water type to be used. Do you see that as something that could help also?
Absolutely. I think that the EPA is always using the term fit-for-purpose treatment and reuse. So there are some crops in some areas that can take a higher TDS water. And there are some crops in some locations that cannot take it because of the soil conditions. So they're the big operational factor that I think people need to understand is the fit-for-purpose treatment and reuse. So different soils, different crops will require different qualities of water. Different applications, whether it's a drinking water or an agricultural water, will require different water qualities. So that's why we're working with the U.S. EPA on developing risk and toxicology analysis techniques and tools and approaches that will allow us to say, okay, what's the fit-for-purpose treatment reuse in this location? What kind of treatments and treatment trains are needed to get to the quality that's needed for that application in this area of the country? So, yes, there are differences across different applications, and that's why this fit-for-purpose treatment reuse varies, and that's why we need to be working with all 35 states, because they're going to be a little bit different in each state and for each application. But it does vary, and we can use it to our advantage. Some cases we can do it really inexpensively. Some cases it's going to be more expensive, but you'd want to apply that then in areas where it would be less expensive and more competitive. Okay.
Yeah, no, that answer is good. So the projects that you manage, are they? How are they funded? Are they funded by the government or partners, or how does that work? And what's the goal to have that been completed?
Yeah, so a lot of the projects we look at are funded, some by government, some by federal funding, some state funding, but a lot of the funding is also funded by private companies that have technologies or from the industry themselves. They, in many cases, they have identified a technology that looks promising. What they would like from us is to work with that technology, test it with an independent third party, if you will, evaluate it as an independent third party, and then provide that independent third party evaluation to them and to the local communities and to the nation through our websites and access to information, such that people can understand which technologies are working well, which technologies need more work, costs associated with that. But our effort really does, from a consortium's perspective, which this consortium is a joint effort by industry, NGOs, environmental groups, regulatory agencies, to try and collect the data that's needed to assess the performance and cost of these technologies. And we do it in a cooperative manner, collaborative, such that it's open to everyone, and that provides then that independent third-party review that allows technologies to get accelerate or facilitate their acceptance. So it's paid for by different groups that have different interests, but in many cases they're shared expenses that we share amongst both industry, NGOs, and regulatory agencies to get the data that's needed to assess the risk and performance. Okay?
Perfect. In our previous conversation we had on the phone a couple of weeks ago, we talked about all the different states and everything else. Why New Mexico? What's so hot about that? I think they're on a list for not getting enough fresh water. But how was that picked? How you start the projects?
Well,
how do you choose them?
Sure. So two things. I don't know if people know this, but New Mexico ranks 49th out of 50 states in freshwater availability. The only state that ranks behind New Mexico is Nevada. Nevada has less freshwater resources than New Mexico. If you compare New Mexico to Arizona, for example, since Arizona has the Colorado River and they get a large allocation of water out of Colorado, Arizona has 3 times the freshwater availability that New Mexico has. So as the 49th state, we're always looking for how can we supplement our freshwater supplies. And so we have some laws in the state, a recent law that was passed in 2019 called the Produced Water Act that actually highlights that the state will identify treatment technologies to support the fit-for-purpose treatment and reuse of produced water. We're also one of the states that has the largest supply of produced water. We generate some 200 to 300,000 acre-feet a year of produced water. To put that in perspective, the city of Albuquerque uses about 50,000 acre-feet. That's the largest city in New Mexico. That's what they consume on an annual basis, 50,000 acre-feet. We're talking about 5 times that amount of water in produced water that we generate currently each year and put down hole. So we have a state that needs the water. We have a lot of additional water that's being produced by the oil and gas industry. So I think we're a natural to have a research consortium that a lot of people are following because we need that water. We're interested, and we've been working with the U.S. EPA for a number of years in this, even before their water reuse action plan. And I think because of that work that we've done historically, they asked us to participate with them and help them drive their RAP program, their water reuse action plan for produced water. And so we're supporting them in doing that. And that's kind of why I think we're at the forefront. And we have the problem, we have a big need, and we have a lot of produced water resources that we can put to use for the state of New Mexico.
Hey, Mike, absolutely fantastic. Just a fascinating subject, and right up the alley for our listeners. But I want to ask you about the One Water concept for just a couple of minutes, and how the issue of all these costs impact the decision to get deeply into the produced water market, if you will. I mean, for so long we've relied on surface water and groundwater, and so produced waters are sort of like the new leading edge, the new wave, kind of like, if you will, right? So has there been any research done that kind of leads us to why we're looking so closely at produced water now? Must have been a tipping point at some point that said, here we go, this is now feasible. Why don't we take a look at it? What's your thought?
So a couple of things, and you're absolutely right that there has been a tipping point, and I think part of the tipping point that we're seeing is the increased aridity that we're seeing across much of the country, especially in the mid-latitude areas, the southern states. And I'm not just talking about New Mexico and Arizona, but California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, across the southern tier of states, where we're seeing reductions in fresh water supply. So everybody's going, man, we need additional resources. Over the course of the last 2 decades, there's been a significant amount of research coordinated through the Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. government, Bureau of Reclamation, on desalination. So in the past, a lot of focus on desalination was on seawater desal. But in the last 2 decades, they've been focusing on brackish water desal. And what we're beginning to find is that these desalination technologies have matured to the point where the cost of desalination of inland waters and handling the concentrate that comes out of that and disposing of it actually can become cost effective, especially if you're comparing that to the cost of bringing in fresh water from another basin. Everybody talks about moving water from the Great Lakes to the Southwest. That's a lot of energy to push water from uphill 1,000 miles to provide water to the Southwest. And what we're finding is that the cost of energy and the new cost of water, if we do desalination with these new technologies, is actually cheaper than trying to move that water 1,000 miles. So the technologies have gotten better in the last 2 decades. The need has increased because of the climate change and the aridity issues that we see in many states, southern tier of states. And the last thing I think that has driven the produced water is that the produced water is on the surface, brought to the surface by the oil companies. The oil companies have paid for it to bring it to the surface. So there's not the pumping costs and the energy costs associated with putting in infrastructure to pump that water. It's already there. It's already been paid for. And now what it does is it makes the cost of treated produced water maybe competitive with some of these other sources. And the final thing is that we found is everybody thinks, produced water comes up with oil and gas. It's got to be really dirty. It's got to be really difficult to treat. And when we compare it to municipal wastewater, we compare it to surface waters in some states like New Mexico, and we compare it to other industrial water supplies, there's the same number of constituents, the same types of constituents, at slightly different levels. And so in all cases, we're going to end up doing desalination technologies to treat this water. And we've been able to apply these new desalination technologies to all of these different waters, storm water, municipal wastewater, produced water, brackish groundwater. And so the cost difference is not that much different. It's in some cases it's less expensive. In some cases it's a little more expensive. So we're trying to figure out where we can play, but in many cases we're finding that it's produced water plays very well as far as in cost and performance because the technologies have matured, and if it's locally available and it's on the surface, the cost of the overall cost can be less expensive than trying to use some of these other types of non-traditional waters. So hopefully that kind of shows why that there's some interest in produced water in many states right now.
Yeah, maybe we can sort of get a little bit of the nebulous feeling maybe a couple of listeners are having about when you say cost and all this. Is it fair to say that most of that cost is made up of energy, the cost of energy or energy demand?
A lot of the cost is energy related, absolutely,
Yeah.
and that is why there's this. When you're trying to do desalination of whether it's a municipal wastewater or a produced water or a brackish groundwater, the costs of energy are going to be about the same. The amount of energy needed, and that's what makes this work, is that all of these non-traditional waters are going to need some aggressive treatment. The aggressive treatments or technologies are similar for all of these wastewaters, and now you can make all of these waters pretty much the same quality for similar costs. And that's this concept that you mentioned, Chris, this one water concept, is
Right.
that all of these waters, though they're wastewaters in different types, because you're going to use similar technologies, they have similar costs, and in some cases they're cheaper than bringing in this water from a long way away, which costs a lot of energy. They become a supply that is cost-effective and appropriate to consider in the future.
Yeah, well,
That's
you
why
made up.
there's the one water concept. Okay.
You even I remember, Mike, you posted on one of the slides that we got from you that, and I found this just absolutely fantastic. Water promises to be to the 21st century what oil was to the 20th century.
Right. So that was a quote from Fortune magazine in 2001. And so, people look at Fortune magazine as an economics publication that talks about economics and growth, environmental stewardship, but also economic development. And so when you have Fortune magazine that comes out and has looked at some of the issues associated with the lack of water to support industrial development, to support economic development, it shows that there are a lot of countries in the world that are under water stress, and those countries that can handle that water stress, develop new water supplies, and address those water issues are going to have the advantages in the future of maintaining good economies and good economic growth. So I think it's important that we all understand that energy is an important factor in economic growth, but if you really track GDP of all of these nations, the thing that really tracks mostly with GDP is water availability. And as we have more and more problems with water stress, we're going to have to look at new opportunities, and that's why we're seeing this big interest by the U.S. EPA, by the Bureau of Reclamation, by the federal government. I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay. To move forward. All right.
Wow. Well, couple more questions we got, and this is a very interesting thing. That's why we said we want to do at least 6 parts and maybe more, because this is going to be a nice long story that's going to have a lot of success at the end. In redoing the water, going through and cleaning it up and such. I know I had a conversation with the Consul General of Israel a couple of years ago, and he was telling me a story how the water agencies there mine the water, again, to use it to make it clean, but to also they've taken out, or they take the solids of the toilet paper, for example, and oil, because they cook a lot in what they call chicken fat, as they use as that, and they make a lubricant out of that and sell it back into the lubricant world. Is that some features that may be coming out of what your organization is doing and making the reuse of water, the things that they mine from that? Could they put that back on a market and resell it, and then that money goes back to reduce the cost of putting these systems in to do the reuse? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're seeing in the produced water is, as I mentioned, it has high salinity, which just means it has high minerals. And when we treat the water, we get some very high concentrations of minerals. And some of the minerals that we get that are of interest to industry, lithium, for example, is one that everybody's going, oh my gosh, you've got lithium in your produced water. Can we get access to it for the green economy and for batteries? There are heavy metals like cobalt. Now, they're not at high concentrations, but once you treat them and desal and concentrate the salts into a stream, we're seeing people that are looking at cobalt, chromium, other kinds of minerals that have value. And there's a company in Pennsylvania currently that's treating produced water out of the Marcellus and making road salt, making other types of materials, making a lithium product. They're in Pennsylvania to help offset their costs. So as I have calls at least once or twice every week with companies that are looking at mineral extraction and mineral supplies. As some of the produced waters have a residual oil, we've got groups that are recovering that oil and then selling that on the market so that they're getting additional funds by the recovery of the oil. So there's a number of ways, Robert, that we're seeing people interested in using the minerals within the produced water to add additional revenue, additional products, and essentially bring the total overall cost down for treatment and reuse of produced water.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, I was going to repeat again how fascinating this is, and I know we're going to have more have more of these, and I want to talk about stuff like the federal regulations and how they impact this, and the story behind the 98th meridian. That's going to be an interesting one. More on economic factors, more on environmental factors, more on treatment technology. Because Mike, I mean, just different kinds of technologies to treat this water, but. I just want to finish my last statement, Rob, and then you can take us to the outro here. But, this is as much a stewardship issue as anything else, Mike. And so hats off to you and your guys. And I know you're not doing this alone. Maybe on another show we can talk about who's with you.
Yeah, we appreciate
that.
Happy
to do that. I'm excited about it. And I do want people to understand that I think the wastewater reuse in general is a water stewardship. We have to make sure that we treat, we have freshwater supplies for our kids and other generations, and we need to be throwing stuff away as wastewater and then having somebody else worry about how to clean it up doesn't make sense to me. We need to be stewards of every freshwater drop that we have, and any freshwater drop that I can save by treating a wastewater and reusing it for another application, I think it's better for the planet and it's better for all of us long term.
Totally agree, and I know we're going to be together a bunch more times. One of the things I'll ask you for the next time is the value of water here in the U.S. versus all around the world, and how we look at it versus the rest of the world. But Mike, thank you very much for being on. We're looking forward to continuing this and bringing your project out in the open, more people in the United States and the world to hear. So thanks again, and we'll be setting up the times shortly for the next 6 segments to follow.
I appreciate it and enjoyed talking with you guys today, and happy to continue to do this for everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Great. And
take care, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah. One thing Chris and I want to tell our listeners that we always do, please help keep our planet blue. And if you like green, you got to have blue to get the green in there. So thanks a lot for listening in. Stay tuned. We'll give you a schedule on the follow-ups of these. This is, again, it's a crucial story that we see. So everybody have a nice weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda, celebrating our 25th anniversary. Sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. The Manhattan District Attorney who brought the hush money case against Donald Trump says he did his job and followed the law. After Trump was found guilty, Democrat Alvin Bragg said he will not talk about any possible jail time for Trump and will let that play out in court. People have been gathering outside the courthouse downtown after the verdict was read.
This is how America is supposed to work, and I feel very happy for America. I feel very happy for democracy, because this is how it's supposed to work.
Meantime, Trump's team will likely seek to have the judge set aside the verdict, and if he says no, experts say there will be plenty of appeals. A top Israeli official says the war in Gaza will probably last another 7 months. Israel's national security advisor made the claim Wednesday on public radio and said they expect another 7 months of combat to achieve the destruction of the military and governing capabilities of both Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Chief Supreme Court Justice John Roberts is declining to meet with Democratic lawmakers to discuss ethics issues in the High Court. Senators Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse asked Roberts to address what they called the Supreme Court's ethics crisis. Artificial intelligence is taking on Wall Street stock analysts. Phil Hewlett has the details.
This week, analysts predicted shares of chipmaker NVIDIA would rise 4% in 12 months with a consensus price target of $1,171 per share. The AI chatbot ChatGPT was asked to make its prognostication about the stock and returned a much different estimate. The large language model projected NVIDIA would be trading above $1,460, nearly $300 per share more than its human counterparts suggest. I'm Phil Hewlett.
You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
KCAA. Miss your favorite show? Download the podcast at kcaaradio.com.
Palm Springs Dispensary reminds everyone during these challenging times they understand the importance of mental health, offering daily deals on everything from top quality flowers to edibles and discounts on CBD products. Palm Springs Dispensary's goal is to help you win the battle within. As one of the area's most beautiful wellness shops located on Garnet Avenue, visit thepalmspringsdispensary.com. That's thepalmspringsdispensary.com.
Hi there, this is Chris Klein, investment manager for Capstone Wealth Management. Hey, I've been through the early 1990s bond market implosion, the late 1990s stock market melt-up, the 2000 to 2002 dot-com crash, the rate hike scare in the mid-2000s, the great financial crisis, the pandemic-induced 2020 collapse, the inflation madness, and, of most recent memory, the 2022 bear market. You know what all these have in common? We helped people